Hi, everybody. So today, for the first time ever, we have a special guest, and we're talking about the one and only Bob Daisley. How are you doing, Bob?
I'm very well, thank you, sir. Nice to talk to you, Paul.
But first of all, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. It's such a pleasure and a great honor to have the chance to talk to such an iconic bass player like you.
Well, you're welcome. It's nice to speak to you. Nice to be here.
We have a few questions that we collected among our bass community. Are you ready for it?
Oh, sure.
All right. First of all, on the Ozzy records, you were a band member and a co-producer as well. What do you recall
Yes.
about that experience? Is it better to share production duties in between band members, or is it better to have an external, impartial person doing it?
Well, that can vary, but on the very first Blizzard of Oz album, we did have a producer come down, Chris Tangarides, who was a good producer. But after the first week, Randy, Ozzy, myself, Lee Kerslake, we had a meeting, and we said, look, we don't really need a producer as such, because we knew what we wanted, we knew how we wanted to sound, we knew everything that we needed, and Max Norman was a good house engineer. He was the house engineer at Ridge Farm. So we said, between us, with Max being a good engineer, we don't really need a producer. So we made the decision at the end of that meeting of asking Chris to just sort of, bow out. We didn't really need a producer. But that's not to say that some projects might be better with a producer. It can vary. I suppose really it depends on who's in the band, how good they are in a studio, and if they want to produce, sort of thing, But we did, and we got on with it, and we got the product that we wanted.
So nowadays we have access to the separate tracks of most of the music that gets released. Do you see this as a bad or a good thing?
Well, I suppose it can be a good thing if you've played well and people get to hear it sort of exposed and naked. But sometimes things are covered up in a mix, and if you expose them, they may not sound so good. So, I think it can be a good thing or a bad thing. But for being inquisitive or curious about exactly what someone played, it's a good thing for that, to be able to find out. So I suppose all in all, it's a good thing.
It takes a bit of the magic away, I think, because you just know what's going on.
Yes. I've heard some Beatles things. I mean, I'm a huge Beatles fan. I love the Beatles. I think they're the best thing that ever happened to popular music. But but hearing some things exposed, it kind of does. It can ruin it for you, burst the bubble, sort of thing. But yeah.
So your style and sound have made a difference on each album you've been on. Beside the obvious reasons like bass amp and tone, your trademark is your sense of melody and the way you punctuate those eighth notes, like Rock and Roll Rebel. How do you come up with such a distinct way of arranging the bass parts so that the bass will really become part of the song hooks and features? And what were your main influences?
I think I was always conscious of that. First of all, to play tight with a drummer. From a very young age, when I first started playing bass, I always thought of the bass as adding notes to the drums, kind of thing. So I always liked to play tight with the bass drum, or with fills, do little runs with drum fills and that sort of thing. But I also like to make it interesting so that it's melodic. I suppose my influences, as far as that goes, Paul McCartney has played some lovely melodic bass lines, but I liked it to be not just melodic, but have balls as well, to be tough, to have backbone and heart, and from the aggression side of things, I would say my influences would have been Jack Bruce, Ronnie Wood when he played bass with the Jeff Beck group in the early days. And I suppose for tone and bass playing approach, people like James Jamerson and Willie Weeks was another very good bass player. So they're my main influences. And to sum it up, yes, melody with aggression, but playing tight with the drums, and don't get in the way of what the guitar is doing or what the vocal melody is doing. So there's a lot of little things going on there that you have to be aware of and have to be conscious of.
Yeah. So what was the normal songwriting process during the Ozzy years? Like, what element would normally come up first in writing songs?
It was always, well, when we first started the band, it was really just Ozzy, Randy, and me. We didn't have a drummer. We were auditioning drummers and writing stuff at the same time. So it really came down to Randy and me sitting on chairs opposite each other and working out sort of the song structure, what should be a good chorus, what should be a good middle part, what be good chords to solo over, that sort of thing. We'd put music together and then Ozzy would sing a vocal melody over it. Okay. So he would sing the tune, the melody over the top of that. And I would take a tape of Ozzy's vocal melody, his phrasing, his approach to words, and he would just sing anything that came into his head, just sort of nonsense lyrics. But then I would take the tape away of his phrasing and his melody, the tune, and put lyrics to it. So I wrote the lyrics at the end of it, really. So that was the order of things. Put the music together, then Ozzy would sing over it and sing the melody and the phrasing, and then I would write the lyrics more towards the end.
So the lyrics would come last?
Yeah, usually, yeah. Okay. And unless sometimes we'd have an idea of a title, or I might have just a few lines of a set of lyrics with that sort of thing. Oh. But usually, yeah, the music, then the melody, then the lyrics.
What part do you think lyrics play in crafting a band sound? Like, is it the words, or is it the sound of the words?
Well, lyrics can form an image of a band as well. I mean, if you write poppy songs, like, or really cliche stuff, like "Baby, I Love You" or "Baby, Don't Leave Me," or, the stuff that's been done 1,000 or thousands of times, See, when we formed that band, I wanted to make the lyrics a bit more sort of not so predictable, not so clear, and form an image. Formed the attitude of the band in the music, but lyrics can be important also in the way they're sung, because I could write, say, some words and Ozzy would say, well, no, it doesn't sing so well. It's difficult to sing that or whatever. So I'd change lyrics to fit what would go over the music better and sound, more presentable, it's easier to sing it smoothly over the music.
So you've been through the vinyl era, then the CDs, and now the internet and streaming services. Where do you see this business going in 10 or 20 years from now?
It's going to go back to gramophones. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I mean, vinyl's become so popular again. There's a lot of young people that didn't live through in the vinyl era that love vinyl now, vinyl, you've got a really, really good deck, like a sort of professional quality deck and perfect records with no scratches or marks or, then vinyl sounds great. I would, so because vinyl started out such a long time ago and it's back again now and has become so popular, I would say that vinyl is going to be around for a good while. And there are still people out there that, I just released the instrumental album that I did and called The Upstarts.
Okay.
And people are, downloading and streaming and that sort of thing. But there are people that say, is there going to be a vinyl album? Is there going to be a CD as well? So people still like the tangible, physical product, so, and I do too. If I still buy CDs. I like CDs.
Okay, so
where it'll end up, who knows? I don't know. Anything can happen. It's if you say 10 years, 20 years time, who knows?
We'll see.
Yeah,
I guess we'll see. Okay, next is the eternal dilemma of the bass player. Like, you have the chance to go back to 1970 and redo all your career. but you can pick only one bass guitar. Would it be a jazz bass or a precision bass?
I'd be a precision. I think they're so versatile. I mean, I've had a couple of jazz basses that I've played for certain tracks. There's even been a fretless jazz that I use. But in general, I think the precision, especially the early vintage ones, the real original Fenders, are very versatile. You can get so many different sounds out of them. And for me, it'd be a precision. I've got my 61 precision, which has got a slab fretboard on it, and that's been such a great workhorse. It's it's been like an old pal. It's gone through the wars with me. It's been on so many tours and so many recordings. And I have a lot of precisions. I've got lots of them, but that one that has been the real workhorse. And so for me, it would be a precision over a jazz. Yeah.
How many bass guitars do you have?
I don't know, about 30. I've got a few guitars, but mostly basses. But about, 30, basses, probably 27, 28 basses. There's a lot on my website. There's all pictures of them on there. And so if anybody wants to see,
definitely.
The ones have a look.
So what's the best bass line you've ever recorded? Your number one, your favorite?
Ever?
Yeah, like if you had to pick one.
I don't know. Well, I did an album in 1970 with a band that I was in called Carver's Jute, and there's a lot of the playing I still listen to now, and I think, wow, it just flowed out of me. I don't know why. I just had that band and that time, and it had some magic, Although there's been lots of things that I played over the years that I get comments on from other people. So, you have to consider what other people like as well. I got a lot of comments about the bass line on the Diary of a Madman album, song Tonight. There's a lot of people that comment on that bass line on that. And I do particularly like that one as well. So
have you ever used like any overdrive or any type of effects?
I remember on Goodbye to Romance, I think there's a bit of chorus and flanger on that. That was just outboard gear in the studio. And when I worked with Gary Moore, and we used to do Empty Rooms, and I played a little fretless solo in that, and I had a pedal that had some chorus and flanger on that for that. But in general, not much. I don't use overdrive or anything like that. Like, for recording and playing live, I usually like to drive a valve amp pretty hard, what you call it, some people call a tube amp, pretty hard. So it's not distorting, but it's sort of growling a little bit, so it's, you get the output transformer and the valve sort of working hard, and it gives a nice growly sound. So, rather than use a pedal for that, I just do it naturally through the amp.
Somebody's saying, I'm struggling to play Bark at the Moon, specifically that fast riff in the chorus. Any tips?
Well, I suppose you, what has it got, 16s in there or something?
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, so 16s, yeah. Well, you could play 4s to start with and then build it up to 8s and then try the 16s or I don't know. I suppose if I was sitting in front of you with a bass and you had a bass, I could manage.
It'd be easier, yeah.
It's probably easier to show you, but yeah, you can play it sort of half the amount of notes or something. Do 8s on it instead of 16s and build it up to 16s and
simplify a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. So next is what did you think about Rudy Sarzo playing on the Diary of a Madman tour, and why was there such a difference between Ozzy's studio band and his live one?
When you say a difference, you mean in just members? Why were the members different on the road to the studio band? Is that what you mean?
I think so. I didn't write down this question, so I guess that's what it means. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Oh, so someone else wrote this down.
Yeah.
Well, they're at that point. Lee and I weren't in the band anymore, and they were going on the road. But it's quite a complicated story, and anybody that reads my book, for fact's sake, would see that the story, how it unfolds, how Lee and I came to be, not in the band, and how the Rudy and Tommy Aldrich thing happened, and they were on the road. But Ozzy always regarded, Rudy was his sort of on the road guy, but Ozzy phoned me while they were on the road and asked me to do the next album. So. Yeah. That simplifies it, but there's quite a complicated story that the book. Yeah.
It's in the book. We're gonna talk about it later. So
sure. Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, for you guys, it's in the book. So make sure you get the book. We're gonna print later the information, how to get the book and all the stuff.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Okay, so which bass line from Ozzy's career after you left do you wish you wrote?
None.
Okay, straight answer. Perfect. Bass.
It's funny, I can hear other people play, and I think, well, yeah, what I would do, and then what I would do is for me, that's my expression. So
yeah,
there's nothing that I can hear and I think, oh God, that's so good. I wish I'd written that.
Yeah.
No, none.
Cool. So how did you get started? What did you start playing bass, and what was the first bass guitar you had?
Well, the first bass guitar I had was a Futurama. It was I'd been attending guitar lessons in a little class of about 20, 25 pupils, and I'd been attending the lessons for about 15 months. And the teacher in the class, one week we went along, it was in like a little scouts hall or something, at a little stage at the end, and he said, look, I've got a band here tonight, and we're talking 1963.
Yeah.
So the band was like a surf and music band. They just played instrumentals. Yeah. And he said, but I want you to see the various roles that people play in a band. There's an electric bass, there's a drummer, there's a rhythm guitarist, and there's a lead guitarist. And they only played 2 or 3 songs for us to see and as soon as I saw the electric, that's what I want to do. I love that. I love the sound. It had strength and backbone and guts but it had sensitivity and warmth, and I went home and I told my mum, I said, Mum, I don't want to play guitar anymore. I want to learn bass. And she was always so supportive.
Yeah. You just know it when you pick up a bass for the first time, you just know it's your thing. I don't know. You just, you're a guitar player, then you try the bass and this is it. Like right away.
That's it. I just saw that guy playing this bass, and I thought, and I could feel the bass amp and the warmth and the strength of it. And then I just went home and told my mum, and she said, well, if you're serious about it, then that's what we'll do. We'll get you a bass. And so we went into the city and we went to a music shop. We went for several music shops and just looked around, and then I found a Futurama bass and a little sort of 15-watt practice amp, and that was me started. My first ever bass, and that would have been sort of 1964.
Yeah.
And just after that, I saw the Beatles live, cool. Which was life changing. I'd already started playing, but seeing them live, it was like, wow! I went out, my jaw hung open, and I was like speechless.
Like so many musicians, like so many famous musicians like you, they just, the Beatles changed their lives. I mean.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, I had started playing already before the Beatles came out, but I remember it would have been sort of late '63, and I was getting ready for high school, and my mum had the radio on in the kitchen, and this song came on. I thought, God, what's that? And I ran out of my bedroom into the kitchen and turned the radio up. I thought, what is this?
Wow.
And it was She Loves You. And the announcement came at the end of the song. Well, then, this is a band in England called the Beatles, and I just loved it immediately. It was just it's had such sort of an effect on me.
What strings do you use, and how did you get started as a pick player? That's the other eternal dilemma of the bass player.
Just going from playing guitar, all the students in the class were using a plectrum. We were told to call it a plectrum, although but straight from guitar to bass, I just carried on using a pick from playing guitar with a pick. So, but you know, it was it felt normal and natural to use a pick on the bass. And when I started working with Richie Blackmore in Rainbow many years later, he said, "I want a bass player that plays with a pick. I want that sort of precision sound. I want the precise notes." And so he preferred that. So that was good.
There you go.
And what was the other? Sorry, what was the other part of the question?
No, it was which string preferences? What string would you recommend? Yeah, strings.
Well, I've since about in 1972, when I was in a band called Chicken Shack, the blues band in England. I bought a bass from, there was a shop called Orange Music in I think it was Denmark Street.
Yeah.
And I bought this that 61 Precision. And I said to the guy in the shop, "I like these strings. What are they?" And he said, "They're piccato." And so I started using piccato strings then. They were British.
Okay.
And they were just standard gauge, 105 to 45s.
Yeah.
But and I've used those ever since.
What's your advice for writing interesting bass lines in a world dominated by guitar? Like, as you said before, don't get in the way of the guitar.
Yeah, well, that's one of the important things is don't cause conflict between the bass and the guitar, or the vocal and the bass, or whatever. But it's always good to have some interesting notes in there that make it melodic,
Yeah.
And I think a good place to start is listening to a lot of the Paul McCartney stuff with the Beatles. He was a master at making the nice melodic bass lines and that, So Jack Bruce was another great. He was brilliant with Cream, some great bass playing in there.
Other than Ozzy, which band would you say was your most memorable while playing with them?
There's been so many.
It's always hard to choose.
Playing with Stan Webb with Chicken Shack is very memorable. I learned a lot from Stan because I was a fan of the blues, and Stan was he was like a walking encyclopedia of the blues, and he was a great blues player himself. So that was a memorable time. There's been many sort of memorable times for different reasons. I was with Mungo Jerry, and we had hit records and did Top of the Pops and television shows and all that. I mean, that's memorable, but if you mean what was the most enjoyable as far as being memorable, Gary Moore's one for sure. That playing with Gary was wonderful stuff. Rainbow's another one. Working with Richie Blackmore and Cozy Powell and Ronnie James Dio was that was a great learning curve for me. I learned a lot from being in that band.
A good list to choose from. You have it's really okay. So let's talk about Black Sabbath. Can you tell us a little more about your experience in recording The Eternal Idol?
Well, I was working with Gary Moore at the time. We had a bit of time off, and there was a producer that I'd worked with Gary called Jeff Glixman, and Jeff Glixman was producing the new Black Sabbath album. And Sabbath had a bass player there called Dave Spitz, and he was they were in the West Indies in Montserrat Studios. Yeah. The George Martin studios, and Jeff Glixman phoned me in England, and he said, "We've got a bass player here, but he can't do the album. He's got to go home. Do you want to come out and do some tracks on the Sabbath album?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I went out there, and I got on great with Eric Singer was the drummer.
Oh wow,
great drummer. Yeah, Tony Iommi, obviously. And Ray Gillen was singing. He was a nice guy and great voice, and I got on very well with Tony Iommi. And for the first day, I was in the studio, and Tony Iommi came in, and I'd recorded one track, "Hard Life to Live," sat down, had a listen, and when the track ended, he just looked at Jeff Glicksman and he said, "Yeah, that's great. Let him do whatever he wants," and walked out.
Perfect, easy.
So it was nice and relaxed, It was lovely, And we used to sit on the balcony at night and watch the sun go down into the ocean, and all these sort of tropical birds, the ones with feathers and wings.
Yeah.
But it was an enjoyable time. It was. They asked me to join the band, and I was flattered, that they'd asked me to join the band. But I said, look, I'm kind of committed to Gary Moore, and I like working with Gary Moore, and that was it. So I just stayed with Gary, and it was. But I did enjoy doing that Sabbath album, and I think that particular album, not because I'm on it, but just because it's a good album. I think it's underrated. It's a really good. It's a great album. The Eternal Idol is, certainly it's certainly worth a listen.
So were you ever informed about the 2002 re-release of Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman with the re-recorded bass before it was released? And what was your reaction to the re-recorded stuff?
No, I didn't know. I just found out after it had been done. Nobody said anything to me. It was, I think we were in the middle of a lawsuit with them over royalties and that at that point, at that stage. But the first time I listened to it, I burst out laughing. I thought, God, what is this? Yeah. I thought it was some kind of joke. When I heard, I thought, but it was. I immediately just felt sad for the fans because those two albums were so well loved by the music lovers and by the fans, and that it was sort of sacrilege to do that to music, and sort of very insulting to the fans. Not so much. Obviously, we expected to be insulted because they did it to us, but to do that to the record buying public and the lovers of music was, not nice.
Could you name like your favorite bass line for every Ozzy record you have made?
Oh, one from each album, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Let me have a think about that. Okay, so the first album, the one called The Blizzard of Oz. Yeah. I like what I played in I Don't Know, the very first track, because it's sort of, it's melodic, and I used a Gibson EB3 on that through one of Randy's amps, through one of his 100-watt Marshalls.
Okay.
And had it mic'd, and I like the sound, and I like what I played in that track. Diary of a Madman, I suppose the track that everybody likes the bass on is Tonight.
Yeah.
So, and I like that as well. It's got a nice vibe to it. It's in a major. It's got major notes, and major usually sounds a bit happier, but I don't know why, but it sounds kind of sad. That bass line, the way it descends with those notes, even though it's major, it sounds kind of sad, which major doesn't usually sound sad. You know. So, next one would be Bark at the Moon. Yeah. So Tired is I like what I did in that. People tended the comments were often that it sounded very Beatlesque.
Yeah, I thought it was a fretless bass. I thought you were using a fretless bass.
No, that was. I know you thought it was a fretless, didn't you? Yeah, that's just the way I played it, the way I slid my fingers and made it sound a bit fretless. But on that album, there is a fretless bass on a track called Spiders.
Oh, beautiful!
And that was a Guild fretless I had.
Yeah,
and I like that track. I like what I played on Spiders as well, because it's the sound and the the obvious character of the fretless. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like it.
And the next one would be No Rest for the Wicked.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I wrote for The Ultimate Sin, but I didn't play on it.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because I didn't really like that album that much. And I know Ozzy used to call it the ultimate din.
It's missing something. It's missing something compared to the other.
Great. It did. Yeah, it missed the boat, that one. Yeah. But the next one would be No Rest for the Wicked. And I suppose I like what I did in Fire in the Sky. You know that track?
Yeah,
I like
yeah,
the
yeah.
sound and the approach. It's not really busy, but it's got a certain sort of signature to it, to what I did for that song. And there's another song that was released as a bonus track on the No Rest album, a song called The Liar. And I think I played a fretless on that, and I
Okay.
like what I did in that in The Liar. It's I like the lyrics I wrote for that too. So The Liar it wasn't on the actual album to start with, but now it's a bonus track, and it's I particularly like that song.
And I think we're
And
still
then we
missing.
have No More Tears,
There you
and
go.
then I think Road to Nowhere was
Yeah.
I like what I did on that, and Mama I'm Coming Home. That's nice stuff too.
So
That's funny to say.
that's Lemmy wrote the song, right? It's Lemmy.
I think he wrote some of the lyrics.
Oh, it's only the lyrics. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because Zach was in the band, and I think Zach he was doing a lot of the song structures and riffs and
Okay.
that sort of thing.
Talking about lyrics, did you ever consider solo albums since since you're also a great lyricist?
I've been asked that before, about doing my own album sort of thing, but it's never been something that I've really thought seriously about or it's appealed to me. I think the closest or the nearest thing that I did to that would be if you're just a bass player and you do a solo album, you've got to have other people on it anyway, like a drummer and a keyboard player and a good guitarist, and I know singers, so there'd be a vocalist and that. So I suppose the nearest thing to that of choosing the songs, producing it, arranging the songs and everything that goes into that was the tribute to Gary Moore album that I did a couple of years ago called More Blues for Gary. I suppose that's the nearest thing to a solo album, but as an out and out solo album, I haven't really thought seriously about it. I don't know. I like working with other people too much. Yes, and you call it a solo album, but is it a solo album anyway? And unless you do everything yourself,
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, if you can play drums, keyboards, guitar, and sing and play bass, and then it's a solo album. That's
Yeah. Okay, so your time with Ozzy was like famously difficult since the very beginning. Why did you stick to working with him for so long?
Well, that's a very, very complicated question, and it has a very, very long, complicated answer. So, really, I mean, unless you got about 3 hours, you'd have to read that in the book.
It's in the book, guys. It's in the book. Get the book.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's in the book. So you'd have to see how the story unfolds over amount of years to really get the full picture with all facets of it. Yeah.
What kind of bass guitar would you recommend for beginners and intermediate players?
Well, some of the reissue Fenders are actually good. If you can't, obviously, a vintage one where it costs a lot of money. An original sort of 50s or 60s precision or jazz bass or whatever, so a lot of the reissue ones now are very good and reasonably inexpensive, and you can go to the Fender custom shop and get a master built that costs more, but you can get the basic reissue one and they're actually pretty good.
So stick with Fender or...
Well, I suppose that really comes down to taste and preferences of what sort of sound you want, and
But it's like the standard, it's just so standard. It's always good.
Precision has been used by so many people over the years in so many different ways, in different musical genres.
It never goes out of fashion. I mean, it's still there.
That's right. That's right.
So what's your favorite song among all the songs you played on, you recorded? What's your favorite one to play live?
Oh, I've always been a bit sort of blues influenced, from a young age when I was only like 14 or something, and I heard the very first original Rolling Stones. It was, and then the Yardbirds, and then Cream, and then Hendrix, and then Zeppelin, and it was an introduction to all the blues influenced music. So anything to do with blues, I lean more towards. So I'd say I really enjoyed playing with Gary Moore when we went on the road and did the promo tour for Power of the Blues. The last album that I did with Gary was called Power of the Blues, and it was, I really liked that album because it's very raw and rough and ready, you know. And we did some live shows after recording that, and I really enjoyed that, you know. So, but you know, I've had some good times over the years with lots of bands, but you know, playing the blues with Gary was that was a highlight for me. Yeah, I love to play blues. Yeah.
Yeah. So during your heavy touring years, what was your practice routine? How many hours a day did you practice, if you practice at all? You know.
Oh, well, don't usually practice if you're playing every night, you know, because that's good enough exercise anyway. If you're playing for an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever, you know. But when I was learning, I used to always put in. I mean, we had a teacher that used to drum that into us. He used to say, "It doesn't matter how much talent you've got. It doesn't matter how much you love what you're doing. If you don't practice, you will never play." He said, "In a million years." He said, "You'll never play unless you practice." He used to always drum that into us. So, and I was only a boy, 13, 14, you know, so I would always put in the time, but I wanted to, because I wanted to learn. I wanted to get better. So I remember when I had school exams, I used to think to myself, God, I have to study, and it's ruining my practice, and it's getting in the way. You know, I just want to practice.
Yeah.
So it was no big deal. It wasn't something that I had to make myself do. You know, I wanted to do it because I wanted to get better at what I was doing. You know, but I'd usually, even in busy times at school and that, I'd try to at least put in an hour a day.
So speaking about Gary Moore, how did your experience with Gary Moore's band compare to your experience working with, I don't know, Ozzy or Rainbow?
Well, I suppose you could compare the situation with Rainbow, with Gary Moore, because Richie was very particular. He knew what he wanted. He knew what, you know, how a song should go, how the band should sound, who should play what. And Gary was a bit like that too, you know. So they were taskmasters, you know. They were quite strict in what they wanted. So that was comparable between Rainbow and Gary Moore. But with the going on the road with the Blizzard of Oz, it was a little looser. It was a little sort of more relaxed, but it was still very disciplined. You know, we wanted it to sound good. We wanted to present it to people as this is a new band. So we wanted to be impressive. So that, you know, I suppose all round, the two, Gary Moore and Rainbow, were sort of similar in as much as they had that one leader, you know, Richie Blackmore or Gary Moore, that knew what they wanted and how everything had to be. But with the Blizzard of Oz, it was just all of us. We all wanted to know each other personally, musically, in all ways, and make the best of it on stage, you know. So
right, so last question. We're going to talk finally about your book, For Fact's Sake, which is almost 10 years old. Yeah, so what pushed you to write it?
Over the years, when I did interviews and you know, with various magazines and you know, or whatever it was, and people had asked me questions, and I'd tell them funny stories or tragic stories or whatever, and quite often they'd say, "Wow, you should put all this in a book." And I'd say, yeah, well, eventually I will. And that went on for years and years. And I remember in the 80s, I was just going to do a picture book. with just captions under each photograph. And there was a magazine, a guitarist magazine in England, that was thinking about, getting behind it and making a book out of all my photographs and just telling the story with photographs and just putting captions under them. But it didn't quite happen. And then eventually, I was going through some old correspondence, letters that my parents had written to me in England when I was there, and friends and family and that. And I was looking through, and I thought, God, it brought back so many memories. And I thought, it's time. I really need to do this book. So, and that was, I think in 2009, I started writing the book, and it took me about 2.5 years to actually write the text part.
Wow.
And then I had to go through literally hundreds and hundreds of photographs and then choose them and then edit the book and do little rewrites and cut stuff out and put stuff in and change things. And so it all added up to about 4 years altogether. So it came out in London. It was launched in London in the summer of 2013. So it's it's about 8 years now. So and it's still selling and people still love it. So it's great. I mean, if you look on Amazon, the reviews that people have done are really lovely. And if anybody's listening that's done a review, thank you, because they're all so nice. Yeah. They've been very kind, and people are loving the book. They enjoy it. So it's been a worthwhile thing to do.
So the link to get Bob Daisley's book is in the description. So make sure you guys check the link in the description and get the book on Amazon. Okay, Bob, thank you so much. I think we're done. Is there anything else you would like to add?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Paul. Very nice talking to you, and all good.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Instagram. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.